All right, for more on the Ukraine war, which marks its third anniversary today, let's speak with Steve Fish, professor of political science at the University of California, Berkeley. Professor, thank you very much for your time today. First off, I'd like your thoughts on Zelensky's comments that he would give up the presidency for Ukraine's NATO membership. What do you make of this offer, and how likely is this exchange going to happen?
Well, the key for long-term Ukrainian security is NATO membership. If Ukraine had been a member of NATO, it never would have been invaded to begin with. If what remains of Ukraine after whatever deal is struck were able to join NATO, then Ukraine's security would be to a large extent assured, provided, of course, that the American president doesn't withdraw from NATO or dishonor NATO obligations. It looks, though, as if President Trump is simply vetoing the prospect of Ukrainian membership in NATO. He has less than no interest in it. What Trump is doing is demanding $500 billion in mineral resources from a country to which the United States has provided about $60 billion in aid, and telling Ukraine that they can expect nothing in the way of security guarantees from the United States or NATO. What Zelenskyy is doing is basically saying, I will even forfeit my own leadership, my own political career, in order to get a deal that is actually good for Ukraine, which involves NATO membership for Ukraine. But it looks as if that's not going to happen.
You touched on this, President Zelenskyy continuing to resist signing a rare earth minerals deal with Washington. Ukraine saying there's just not enough security guarantees. How significant is this card for Kyiv, and how likely could Zelenskyy be forced into a deal?
Well, Teresa, there's really no way to force him into a deal. Ukraine's going to continue fighting this war, no matter what the United States does. It doesn't have $500 billion in rare earth minerals that can fork over to the United States. What's more, that would be about 8 times what the United States has provided already in terms of aid. And what President Trump completely doesn't acknowledge, and people of his ilk don't acknowledge in his administration and some of his Republican colleagues, is that the United States and Western Europe owe Ukraine a great deal of gratitude, an enormous debt of gratitude. They have been actually holding, Russian imperialism at bay. What we have given them in terms of aid, both the United States and the Europeans, is a pittance. It's a drop in the bucket compared to what Ukraine has done for us to hold back Russian aggression. Trump, of course, doesn't see it that way. Trump sees everything in terms of transactions and in terms of his own economic interests. You might have actually noted that during the talks in Riyadh, Trump administration officials announced that they're talking about new geopolitical and financial arrangements with Russia. In other words, they're interested in linking Russian and American economies in a way that actually will be beneficial for President Trump himself. We've seen this with his Middle East policy during his first term in office. Trump is concerned above all with his own fortune. And he knows that Putin is the one person in the world who can make a billionaire of you overnight if he regards you as his friend. Trump has been beholden to Putin ever since he was running for president in 2016. Trump has always had a special and bizarre affection for Putin. And there are several reasons for this. One is that Trump knows that Putin can help make him rich. He also knows that Putin is the one world leader, along with Kim Jong-un, that supported Trump in 2016, while the rest of the world was aghast and laughing at Trump. And Putin is someone who he seeks to emulate. He wants to be like Putin. He wants to have what Putin has. All the power in the country, no checks on his power, no free press, and more money than God. These are the things that Trump wants, and he admires Putin for these things. He's very interested in a ever closer relationship with Putin, not at all interested in defending Ukraine. This is a complete change in the way the United States government views its own national interests.
Okay, let's just dive a little deeper into Putin's refreshed pact with the United States. Professor, from your reading, are Russians buoyed by this? And, that there's hope the war could actually end on their terms? Or is there something we're missing higher up Trump's sleeve that we're not aware of?
I don't think there's anything higher up Trump's sleeve Yasmin, Trump is pretty transparent about what he's doing. He's basically saying, I'm selling out Ukraine. I'm accusing Ukraine of having provoked the invasion by Russia. That would be like President Roosevelt in World War II, accusing France and Britain of provoking invasions and bombings of their country by Hitler, and then turning around and saying, I think I'll sit down with Hitler and make a deal, and we'll figure out what to do with the French and the British. And meantime, Hitler and I will become good buddies. A completely different way of looking at the world, obviously. So Trump, I think, is quite transparent in his approach. Now, this is, of course, terrific for Putin and for his invasion. I don't know what ordinary Russians think about this. It's hard to tell. Russia is so locked down now with such a highly authoritarian system that we don't know. We know, of course, they want an end to the war. Some support Putin's war effort. Others see it for the kind of disaster it's been in many ways for Russia. And of course, this is disastrous for the Ukrainians themselves. They are now, prone to view the United States as a disloyal partner. I hope that most Ukrainians understand, though, that this isn't all Americans. Indeed, it's just, for the most part, President Trump and his people that are betraying Ukraine.
And if Donald Trump does indeed end this war quickly and on Russia's terms, what would Moscow have gained from these past 3 years, Professor? And would all the lives lost have been worth it?
Well, from Putin's point of view, it certainly will be worth it, no matter how many lives are lost, because Putin doesn't care about Russian lives. He cares about conquering territory. He's been very clear about that. And if he gets to keep the territories that he now occupies, which are about 1/5 of Ukraine, it will have definitely been worth it for Putin. There's no doubt about that. But at the same time, this kind of thing was only possible with the Trump administration coming to power. There are two things, though, that we should remember. First of all, this war is going to go on. The Ukrainians are not simply going to accept the loss of their territories. Putin is demanding more than that. The demilitarization of Ukraine, which means Ukraine folds up its military, control of Ukrainian foreign policy and Ukrainian domestic policy by Russia, and so on. There's no way the Ukrainians are going to accept this, and they will continue to fight, for sure. So the second thing to remember is that Putin is not interested in some lasting peace. If Putin gets his territories that he's occupying, all he's going to do is go home and gear up for the next war on Ukraine, or gear up for pressuring Ukraine even more. He will rearm his military. He will try to seek some economic recovery, and then he will do this again. We know this because Putin has never accepted Ukrainian sovereignty. He has never accepted the idea that Ukraine is a separate entity, that is a sovereign country. He thinks Ukraine is part of Russia, and that Russia can't be an empire unless Ukraine is part of it. Putin further thinks that Russia is rightfully an empire that has the right to control and annex, indeed, all of its neighbors, including countries that were part of the Soviet Union. So this so-called deal, whatever it ends up being, is not going to end the conflict in Ukraine. In fact, it could plant the seeds for a much greater conflict in the future.
Professor, I want to pivot things to our part of the world here in Asia. Weeks before the conflict began, China and Russia declared they had a no-limits partnership. Moscow has engaged with Southeast Asia on a regional level, joining in events such as the ASEAN Defense Ministers Meeting Plus. In your view, what could a protracted war mean for Russia's engagement in this region?
Well, obviously, it's taken a lot of attention away from Russian engagement in that region. Russia depended on Chinese support for his invasion. As you might recall, he actually went to Beijing shortly before the war started and essentially got Xi Jinping's okay to start this war. It's a pretty clear deal. Russia gets to invade Ukraine. It can do whatever it wants there. Russia essentially endorsed Chinese invasion of Taiwan, and of course will endorse Chinese imperialism throughout Southeast Asia. That's just part of this, what they call this kind of eternal deep friendship between Putin and Xi Jinping. The end of the war, what effect will that have on Russian engagement in Southeast Asia per se? Certainly, it will allow Russia to spend more attention and energy on that, but I don't think it's going to make a large difference overall.
All right. Really appreciate your time and your thoughts today, Professor Stephen Fish, Professor of Political Science at the University of California, Berkeley. Thank you.